Okay, thank you for attending the class. Okay, I think this is quite stressful time for you now with a lot of the assignments, presentations, and maybe we still have some tests to attend to. Okay, so in today's class, we're going to discuss on standard on research and publication. Okay, so please pay attention because one of the final exam questions uh, touching about this topic. Okay, so I presented the final exam question last week, and on in general, they have accepted the questions with a slight modification. So one of the questions coming from this topic. Okay, along the way, I'm going to discuss and explain how you should approach in your revision and how you should approach in answering this question. Okay, so I'm not using usually I will use my earphone, but this time I'm using an external microphone. So if you somehow feel that the voice, the audio is not okay, so please inform me on the chat later or during the class. Okay, so this standard, I plan to discuss everything about this standard today, but while preparing for the class, for the slides, I believe that there are quite a lot for us to cover on standard on research and publication. There are 15 substandards applicable under this standard. So we look at it. If we are able to finish everything, which is that will be good. Otherwise, I have to expand the discussion to next class. Okay. So for this standard, we have 15 other substandard provided under this or applicable under this standard of research and publication. But there are some concepts or some standards are overlap. Okay, overlaps, which is the one that you've discussed previously, such as confidentiality, anonymity. Those are applicable in this standard as well. We look at it one by one. Okay, if you have any questions, please do not feel hesitate to ask me to clarify or to elaborate more on any concept that you don't understand. Okay, under research and publication, okay, first and foremost, psychologists, researchers, okay, psychologists or psychology researchers, they need to acquire institutional approval. Okay, the exact words that put under in the standard is when institutional approval is required, psychologists provide accurate information about their research proposal and obtain approval prior to conducting the research. They conduct the research in accordance with the approved research protocol. Okay, I think the wording itself is not really difficult to understand. Okay, regardless whether we doing assignments or we doing a real research project or we doing consultation, as long as we are psychologists, as long as we involve employees of organizations or member of organization, we need to request for institutional approval. Okay, there are 4 requirements of standard 8.1. Okay, 4 requirements for institutional approval, which are the first one, psychologists must know whether and from whom institutional approval is required. Okay, things like this. Okay, I think you have done number of assignments already since you're already in your second year. Okay, when we do research, we need to identify what or which authority levels that we need to approach and to seek their permission. Okay, I give you an example in school. Okay, school. Okay, say for example, you have parents or you have uncle or teachers who are working as a teacher in a particular school. Then you want to conduct a research about, say for example, personality orientation of secondary school teenagers, secondary school students. Okay, and then you might be thinking that you only requires to ask approval from the school authority itself, or maybe the headmaster or the principal of the school. But here it involves other parties. If it is a private school, then it's okay for you to request for approval from the school itself. But if the school under the purview of Ministry of Education, okay, under Kementerian Pendidikan atau Kementerian Pelajaran, actually you need to ask for permission and you need to ask for approval from the ministry itself. Okay, so in this standard 8.1 institutional approval, first and foremost, we need to know to whom we need to ask for permission. Okay, to the school, to the ministry, and possibly to the parents and teachers association. Okay, Persatuan Guru dan Ibu Bapa. Okay, PIBG, Persatuan Ibu Bapa dan Guru. Okay, sorry terbalik. Okay, so here you need to know to whom we need to ask for the permission. Secondly, application for institutional review must be accurate. I think that previously in Dr. Alizi, you have discussed that supposedly or ideally, all psychological research proposals need to be sent to be evaluated, to be reviewed by Institutional Review Board, IRB. Okay, and usually in all institutions, regardless whether it's a university or whether it's a research institution, whether it's a government institution, they need to establish a review board. Okay, a review board, a committee, Datuk Jawatan Kuasa, who are looking for the ethical aspects on the potential risks and benefits and all articles consideration, which will be carried out by any particular research. And usually, this board will screen all of the risks and benefits, all of the ethical standard, ethical protocols during the proposal stage. When we apply, okay, I believe that in UTM we are yet to have IRB or in our institutional review board. They are in the process of establishing one. But from previous institutions that are coming from, they already have established one. So every research, including student research, we need to submit a proposal to them. We need to clarify, we need to elaborate all research procedures, all research methods that we are going to do in the proposal and ask for approval. We need to mention whether our study, our research going to involve a human being, going to involve animals, going to involve teenagers, underage, school children, toddlers, or parents. We need to mention in details in the proposal. Okay. The second requirement here indicates that when we apply for the approval, we need to specify all research procedures that we are going to do. So it must be accurate. The third one, approval must be obtained before the research is conducted. Okay, so it's not going to be backward or you cannot backdate your approval. Okay, even though, say for example, UTM currently don't have IRB or say for example, when you are working, you are doing research for your own institution, okay, you must certify, okay, all of your research procedures, all of your research protocol before you go for data collection, okay, before you start your research. And number four, research procedures must follow the approved protocol. What do you mean here? When we apply for IRB approval, Institutional Review Board approval, we already specify, we already details out what are the tasks, what are the actions, what are the activities that we are going to do. Okay, after you receive your approval, you are not allowed to change the research procedures. Okay, you need to follow all of the research procedures which you already mentioned in your proposal. Okay, what happens if you need to change? Okay, what happens if you need to change? Okay, am I recording this? Yes, okay. What happens if you suddenly need to change your data collection? Okay, it happens. Say for example, this is what happening previously, okay, in towards at the beginning of PKP, okay, when we start with COVID-19, COVID-19 pandemic, and we the control order was implemented. Okay, we cannot move. Okay, we cannot come to work. Okay, so a lot of research basically has been stopped. Okay, banyak research, banyak penelitian yang dijalankan terpaksa ditangguhkan. Has been stopped, has been delayed, okay, has been postponed. Why? Because the research procedures that have been proposed at that particular time cannot be carried out. Okay, you cannot collect data. You cannot simply change the data collection from physical, from interviews, from observation, from physical survey to online survey to online interview. In order for you to do that, you need to inform your IRB panel or IRB committee that you are changing that protocol. Okay, depending on consideration, this committee, okay, the IRB committee will consider whether to ask to give you approval or permission to amend, or they will require you to submit a new proposal with the amended research procedures. So it's depending on their consideration. So this is happening. I think it's happened. So you might need to ask for permission again from your IRB if you happen to need to change your research procedure. So this is the first substandard under standards on research and publication. Okay, the second substandard, okay, the second important factors under research and publication is informed consent to research. This is very important. Okay, this is very important. When I am in the full presentation mode, I couldn't see your question. Okay, some of you. How about now? Is it okay? My volume? My there is a question. There is a message from one of you, but sent privately. Okay. So the person who asking, can you hear me now?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the second aspect in research and publication, okay, the standard 8.02, informed consents to research. Okay, basically, it's a very important aspect. And even though that you have been doing a lot of research, okay, the first time when I joined UTM, I was asked to evaluate what we call PSM FYP project. Okay, so I've evaluated I think around 12 research proposal. Okay, and all of the research proposal have not addressed any of the ethical consideration. Okay, firstly because it's not in the format, so the student don't do it. But I already informed them that you need to include. Okay, even though you don't put the subheading of ethical consideration, but you need to address the most some important aspect of ethical consideration. Okay, such as informed consent. Okay, informed consent. There are a lot of issues. There are a lot of debate under informed consent. We're going to look at it one by one. And then it's quite lengthy. On discussion on informed consent itself is quite lengthy, as if that we are discussing the whole chapter. Okay, so under standard of informed consent to research, okay, when obtaining informed consent as required in standard 3.10, which you learned before, informed consent, psychologists inform participants about one, the purpose of the research, expected duration, and procedures. So that's why when you ask to answer a survey, okay, ask an answer a survey, usually in the introduction or in the booklet, okay, in the front page of the survey, it will mention that this research is about what, okay, about what, Okay, how many minutes, okay, more or less will be taken for you to answer the survey, and what are the procedures. Okay, procedures usually for the survey is very simple and straightforward, but if you are involved in experiment, for example, they need to details out what are the procedures, what are the tasks, what are the expected response from you when you agree to join or to be involved in the research. Okay, the purpose of the research, expected duration, and procedure. They here means researchers, okay? They also need to inform us that we have the right, okay? We have the right, we have the freedom, we have the right to decline to participate or to withdraw from the research once participation has begun. In other words, say for example, your friend or me myself ask you to answer a survey or questionnaire, you have the rights, okay, you have the freedoms, okay, without any repercussion, without any effects that you have the right, you have the freedom not to participate. See, basically because it's a voluntary basis. And say for example, you at the first place, you agreed to participate. Okay, you agreed to participate. However, when answering the first section, you feel that the question is so intimidating and you don't feel comfortable to answer it. So you may withdraw your participation, your agreement, your informed consent. You withdraw your consent, and then you can stop anytime during answering the question or during an experiment or during the interview if you feel that you are not comfortable. That is basically your right. Okay, number three, the foreseeable consequences of declining or withdrawing. See, say for example, I'm telling you that if you answer my survey, okay, you will be awarded, okay, you will be compensated with RN 50 ringgit. If you answer the whole survey, I'm going to give you 50 ringgit. And then say for example, you agreed to participate and then you are entitled to get that 50 ringgit. However, while answering the questions, okay, while answering the survey, you don't feel comfortable and then you want to withdraw. Okay, researchers need to explain if you want to withdraw in the middle of the interview or in the middle of answering the question, are you entitled to get maybe 50% or 30%, or you don't entitled to get any compensation, okay, for what you have done. So here we need to mention whether, okay, if we are researcher, we need to mention that if you don't answer or you don't give a complete answer towards the survey, or you don't answer it all the question, you are not entitled to get the gift or the honorarium or the any compensation. Okay, it requires you to answer all the questions. That it need to be specified. Okay, so reasonable foreseeable factors that may be expected to influence their willingness to participate, such as potential risk, discomfort, or adverse impact. Okay, say for example, you are doing research about marriage, okay, and then one of the questions asking about whether you have been dishonest towards your husband or towards your wife. In other words, you have cheated your husband or your wife before. Okay? If you have those kind of questions in your survey, okay, you need to inform them whether you have any risk. Okay? There are any risk if you answer the survey. Okay, I give you an example. Okay, we have this skepticism. Okay, we are a bit skeptical when our own employer or our own teacher or our own university ask us to answer a survey or answer a questionnaire, because we think that we want to get to know certain things. I think they want to evaluate, they want to judge us. A researcher, as a psychologist researcher, we need to inform what is the risk. Okay? What are the potential effects if they answer it, if their score is high, or if their score is low. Okay, whether they are going to feel discomfort or uncomfortable while involving in the interview, involving the in the questionnaire. Okay, if you are doing that research, okay, say for example marriage, okay, and then you're doing interview and you interview both husband and wife, okay, at the same time, and then you are asking those kind of questions whether they have been dishonest towards their partners before. Okay, so if you are asking that, you need to inform that, and if first and foremost, it's not unethical. And if you are doing interviews separately, husband separately and wife separately, you need to inform that you are not going to tell or to inform their partners about their answers. Okay, any prospective research benefit. Okay, if you are doing research and then you are providing some token of appreciation. I think you are giving some gift, okay, or some compensation. If you answer this, okay, if you answer it completely, you are entitled to get Grab voucher, or you are entitled to get McDonald voucher or Shopee voucher. So you need to inform it in the informed consent form or in the introduction in the front page of your questionnaire. Limits of confidentiality. Okay, this is a bit technical. Okay, there are some research that we have conducted, yeah, as a psychologist that involve a very important, very urgent, essential aspect. Okay, say for example, mental health. Okay, mental health, and you are doing research. You want to know teenagers' suicidal tendency. Okay, suicidal tendency. Kecenderungan untuk membunuh diri. Okay, we have a scale on suicidal ideation. Pikiran ataupun kecenderungan untuk melakukan bunuh diri, okay, for teenagers. Okay, then if you are conducting the research, you want to see stress for teenagers and its relationship with suicidal ideation. Okay, their tendency to commit suicide. You need to inform that as part of our responsibility, if any of your respondents showing high tendency to commit suicide, kecenderungan yang sangat tinggi untuk melakukan bunuh diri. Okay, at the first place, we need to assure confidentiality. I think you've learned it at the beginning of the class. Okay, not this class, we got the Ali. Okay, we need to assure confidentiality, which means that we are not going to disclose their information. We're not going to disclose their score, their marks of our test to other person. We just want to analyze the data. But when you get those kind of information, okay, those kind of result, high tendency to commit suicide, there must be some limit in a way that you need to inform or you need to call back for further assessment or you need to inform other authority. Okay, say for example, you are just a researcher, you're conducting research in a school, you need to inform the counselor to summon, okay, or to call these students or these participants so that we can conduct further examination whether they are truly having these ideas or this or not. Okay, so when we are informing others, we are basically have a breach or we are no longer following or adhering to confidentiality aspect of the research. Okay, we need to inform that on limits of confidentiality. Okay, it's not that we are going to tell the police or tell the enforcement officer, but for their own benefit in terms of health, we need to to discuss with authority and with counselors and possible refer them to clinical psychologists. So when we wanted to do that, I think we want to pursue further on the case, we are actually breaching our confidentiality. So if there is a possibility for that, then we need to inform limits of confidentiality before that particular respondent or participant or students agree to participate in our study. Okay. Number 7, incentive for participation. Okay, we need to inform is basically similar to this number. Okay, similar to number 4, for example, if they have any effects or if, say, for example, we already promised certain amount of compensation or token of compensation, but they stops in the middle, so whether they are going to receive or not. Incentive for participation also have some issues in that. We're going to look at it later because too much incentive also is not allowed. Okay, we are allowed to give some incentive. Okay, because of the time, the effort that being put forward by our participant, by our respondent. But the amount itself will not be something that will force them. Okay, say for example, you go and ask the what we call homeless people to answer your survey. And then you inform them, if you answer the survey, we are going to give you 100 ringgit. Okay, 100 ringgit. And then if they feel that their participation in that, basically they are not comfortable to be interviewed, for example. However, because you are offering something which is they cannot deny, okay, they cannot refuse. So it's basically the incentive itself provides a coerce or a forcing factor for them to accept it, even though they are basically they are not comfortable with our research. So incentive for participation is allowed, but the amount of the incentive or the type of incentive must be considerable. Okay, usually our IRB, okay, the consideration of our institutional review board will also look into that. Okay, whom to contact for question about the research and research participants' rights. Okay. Regarding the same analogy that I give, example that I give, say for example, we do research about suicidal ideation, and then suddenly one of the respondent or two of the respondents demonstrate high levels of tendency. Okay, they basically want to commit suicide. So if, say for example, you cannot contact the person, okay, the respondent, who are we going to contact? Okay, who are going to refer to? Okay, they provide opportunity for the prospective participant to ask questions and receive answers. Okay, we also need to provide to our contact numbers, emails, or usually people don't give a phone number, but if you have to, it's okay. Why? Because if they have any concerns regarding our study, our survey, our interview, our experiment, they can ask for clarification, they can ask for information. Okay, so this is basically the second standard under research and publication. Okay, there are, like I mentioned before, there are many aspects. Okay, there are many aspects in informed consent that we need to address, that we need to understand. First is ensuring consent is informed, rational, and voluntary. So when we ask for consent, okay, our consent must be informed. Informed means that they understand what they need to do, what are expected from them, what are they required to do when they are agreed to join our research, join our study. And then it must be rational. Okay, we cannot lie to them. Okay, deception is not acceptable except for exceptional circumstances. It must be voluntary. Okay, it must be voluntary. Say for example, you are a lecturer. Okay, you are a teacher, and then you ask your students to answer your survey. If your students are reluctant to answer the survey, basically you cannot force them. Okay, you cannot force them to participate in the survey or in the study. It must be informed, it must be rational, and it must be voluntary. Within the context of research, informed consent requirement reflect principle E, which is respect for people's rights and dignity by ensuring that individuals' decision to participate is informed, voluntary, and rational. To comply with this standard, psychologists, we must obtain and document. We not only obtain it, we must document it, we must record it, we must write it down, written or oral consent in the manner set forth in standard 3.10, informed consent, which you have learned with Dr. Alizi before. So usually in my research, for example, I will provide an informed consent form. Okay, under the informed consent, I will highlight the research objectives. Okay, all of the rights of the respondent to withdraw, okay, to not participate, and then what are their incentives, and then what are the estimate times. Okay, but nowadays I look at the survey, they basically mention it on the front page only. They don't provide any consent form. Okay, and then if say for example Usually in the interview, when I submit my request letter, I will inform them. And then during the interview, I will ask them again on their agreement or their approval or permission to be interviewed. Okay, the informed component of consent requires that individuals are provided all of the pertinent information needed to make a reasoned choice about whether they wish to participate in a study. This includes providing information in a language and at a language level understood by prospective participants, and where applicable, their legally authorized representatives. Okay, representatives. There are research about nowadays there are many research about B40. Okay, B40 people who are the lower category of income in Malaysia, for example. So if say, for example, you want to go and conduct a research in a rural area, and your research is basically in English, so if you want to ask for their consent, and you know that they are not really proficient, okay, they don't really understand English quite well as you are. And you already know that. Okay, when you already know that, you need to provide your consent form in the language that they understood, okay, that they are proficient with. Okay, if they speak Malay, and then you need to explain them in Bahasa. If say for example they are not comfortable with English but they are comfortable with Tamil, and then you need to provide your consent and inform them in Tamil. Same goes to other language, Mandarin, Arabic, or maybe go to any other places which they don't really understand standard Malay. Okay, they have slangs. Okay, you go to Kedah, you go to Kelantan, you go to Terengganu, you go to Sabah, Sarawak, you go to any other places which they don't really understand standard Malay even, then you need to find someone who are competent, who understand it better to translate and to explain to them on behalf of yourself. Okay. Say for example, you are doing research, but not in Malaysia. You're doing research in Indonesia, for example. And then your research, basically, you only understand English and Malay, and your potential respondent don't really understand the same way they understand your English or your Malay. So you need to find some local who understand you, and then you need to ask them to explain on behalf of yourself and on behalf of your research. Okay, and sometimes you may be, if you are doing research at a larger scale, you have a research assistant, you have enumerators, you have research officers. You need to train them as well to make sure that they understand the language. You make sure that they are able to explain to the respondents in their own language. Okay. Describing the nature of participation. Okay, prospective participants, their legal guardian must be given information and the opportunity to ask questions about the purpose, duration, procedures, the risks and potential benefit and compensation involved in the participation. The information obtained must be sufficient to make an informed consent. Okay, when we inform participants, okay, usually when it's involved risk or involve some sensitive information, doing with students, for example, with teenagers and school children, okay, you need to also inform their legal guardian, okay, their parents, okay, if they don't have parents who are looking after them. Okay, in other countries, legal guardians requires some sorts of formal information from the government. So you need to request for that. Okay, and then there are papers mentioning that he or she is basically the legal guardian of a certain person. So you need to inform them and you need to give them opportunity to ask questions. Okay, to ask questions. You cannot basically stop them from asking questions. And then another aspect in informed consent is compensation. Okay, like I mentioned before. So we usually provide or give some forms of compensation, some form of token of appreciation. This is basically not to bribe them. Okay, no, we're not going to bribe them, but it's basically to appreciate. Okay, to appreciate their efforts, their commitment, and their time for their participation. Okay, prospective participants must also be informed. Sorry, must also be informed about the condition under which they will qualify for partial or full compensation for participation or continuation of experimental intervention if they withdraw from the study. Okay, so we need to inform them what are the requirements. Like I mentioned before, say for example, you promise them they are going to receive 50 ringgit token of appreciation if they answer your survey. Okay, but the condition is they need to answer all of the survey. If they answer, if they return incomplete survey, okay, even though it's only 10% or 20% incompletion, they are not going to qualify, or they are not qualified to receive the compensation. Okay, or you just inform them if you participate here and you're not finished, okay, maybe 50%, okay, you're going to receive 50% of the 50 ringgit or 55 ringgit. So you need to inform them. Okay, for some cases, especially in our field of study, psychology, sometimes we don't promise monetary or materials token of appreciation. Okay, we don't have a dog gift or we don't have money to give. But we tell them that if you participate in this study, you will receive a privilege by we are going to train them. We're going to give them a free therapy session. It's a free therapy session. And suddenly, in the middle of the research, they withdraw. Okay, they withdraw. So whether they are still qualified for the free therapy session or they are not qualified for the therapy session. So we need to inform all of the conditions, okay, all of the terms and conditions, semua syarat-syarat yang perlu mereka patuhi in order for them to receive all of the token of appreciation, compensation, or rewards that we are going to give to our respondent or our participant. Okay, in informed consent, we also need to inform the right to decline or withdraw participation. Okay? Consent procedures must directly inform participants that they will not be penalized for declining or withdrawing from participation, especially when the prospective participant has reason to believe that dissent may result in adverse consequences. There are the consequences. Like again, example that, say for example, I believe that some of your lecturer or even me myself, I do sometimes ask respondents or ask my students to answer surveys, maybe from your seniors or maybe from other researchers. Okay, when someone who has the authority asks you, okay, you might have this feeling or perception that if you don't answer it, you will be penalized. Okay, you will be punished, okay? Or you will not receive extra mark, for example. Okay, our informed consent, okay, our informed consent exercise or informed consent form, we need to inform that if they are not willing to answer or join or involve in the research, they are not going penalized, especially if basically if someone who asks you have the authority. If they are teachers, okay, they are parents, or they are seniors, or they are enforced policemen, okay, enforced officers. So basically, you have the right not to participate. And then, if you are in this condition, they need to inform you clearly that basically your participation, if you are not willing to participate, there are not going to be any punishment. And next is confidentiality. The disclosure of confidential information can result in criminal or civil liability or financial or social damage to participants. Okay, that's why early on, okay, in the class, we have discussed at length, okay, confidentiality, anonymity of your respondent. So in informed consent, we also need to inform our respondent that confidentiality is basically assured in the research. Okay? And sometimes, okay, most of the time, I will assure both confidentiality and anonymity. Okay, anonymous. So basically, we're not going to know who are participating in the research. And sometimes they have difficulties because we already know. Okay, we already know. Or sometimes when you want to answer it, you need to provide some information, okay, such as your email address. So if you cannot assure anonymity, okay, you must assure confidentiality. Okay, confidentiality of the data, okay, confidentiality of the information of your respondent. So in informed consent procedures, we must provide a clear explanation on the extent and limits of confidentiality, okay, including First, whether investigators, ourselves, the researchers, must comply with reporting requirements such as mandated child abuse and elder abuse reporting or duty to warn the laws. Okay, we need to inform them. Say, for example, again, the examples of suicidal ideation. We need to inform them if a certain cases there are limitations. Say, for example, you have a very high score of suicidal ideation, and then that is basically breach the limit of confidentiality. You are going to inform to counselors or to refer them to clinical psychologists or going to report to their parents, and then it also must be informed in our informed consent. The investigator confidentiality and disclosure policy for responses, indicating that a participant or another person is in immediate danger or otherwise at a high level of risk. This in case like suicidal ideation, if they are basically high risk or immediate danger, then basically we are not going to assure the confidentiality. So we need to inform them. And whether the method of data collection itself may limit the extent of confidentiality protection, as may be the case when research is conducted via the internet. Okay. So when we conducted online survey, okay, Google form, quick survey. So these are basically the famous or most preferred data collection techniques, especially starting from the PKPs, okay, the movement control order. However, we have the risk of basically data breach or someone hack our information or someone can see the information. So we need to assure that how we can protect, okay, respondent information, identity, and how can we assure the confidentiality aspects of the research. Okay, so next is basically still under informed consent of research, adult with questionable capacity to consent. Okay, so previous discussion, we assume that the person have the authority, have the mind and body to mind and physical attribute of capacity to give their own consent. However, there are cases, okay, there are cases when we conduct research, our respondent have a special needs, okay, special needs. Say, for example, students are people who are schizophrenic or Alzheimer or bipolar disorder or drug addicts, okay, drug addicts who basically, when they are under the influence of the substance, they cannot think clearly or evaluate clearly. So the rational component of informed consent requires that prospective participants, prospective respondents, be able to understand the information presented. The psychologists often conduct research involving adult population with questionable consent capacity. The people who have you know, who have special needs. Okay, they cannot think or evaluate properly. Sometimes in our culture, we call people who are, they are not basically insane, okay, but normal people will tell that maybe there are people who are lurus or basically they cannot think carefully. They are naive in a way that they, even though they are adults, but their evaluations and thinking is basically same as school children. So these people are adults with questionable capacity to consent. The general requirement for informed consent detailed in standard 3.10 that we have discussed before require that psychologists provide appropriate explanations and obtain approval for research participation from persons legally incapable, okay, who don't have the capacity of informed consent, and when required or permissible, obtain appropriate permission from legally authorized persons, even though they are adults. Okay, they are adults, so but they don't have that capacity. Okay, they are gifted or they are basically have some issues. So you need to ask permission from their parents or their guardians, okay, their spouse or maybe their children, okay, for example, Alzheimer. So you need still to ask for informed consent. When consent capacity of participant population is known to be questionable, psychologists should use available assessment techniques to determine the ability of prospective participants to understand the nature of and their rights in research, and when possible, implement procedures to enhance their understanding. Okay, simple. People who are drunk, okay, people who are under the influence of drugs, okay, at that particular moment, they don't really have the 100%, okay, the total capacity to think, okay, to understand, okay. So basically, their consent at that particular moment, okay, or even Alzheimer, people who always forget, for example, they don't have this capacity to give their consent, okay. Even if they give their consent, it's basically questionable because they are under the influence of drugs or maybe they forget. So what you need to do is, and they don't have guardian, okay, they don't have people around them, parents or children or spouse to give the consent. You need to conduct other assessment. You need to conduct other assessment to evaluate whether they are mentally sound or they are intellectually sound to give the consent. You say, for example, you want to study um, psychological traits or intelligence. You want to study about intelligence among Alzheimer, okay, among adults, okay, among senior citizens who are 60, 70 years old. Then you want to see whether their intelligence is basically normal or less than according to their age or better according to their age. And then you have this perception that he or she might already have Alzheimer, okay, Alzheimer. So if there is no other persons to give you the information, you need to test them. Okay, you need to give Alzheimer test, or you need to observe them, or you need to give any assessment or survey to make sure that they are basically sane, they are basically are able to think and evaluate as a normal person. So you need to give them some assessment. Okay. That is for the issues, informed consent issues with adult with questionable capacity to give their consent. Okay. So what happened to child? Okay, child. Parental permission and child assent to pediatric clinical trial. So since we are not clear yet what are happening about these issues in Malaysia, we can refer to what are basically being put forward in the United States. Okay. Under U.S. federal regulation, the assent, the approval to participate, okay, by the children, okay, the assent requirement may be waived when the child's age, maturity, psychological state, or health status indicates an inability to provide informed or rational assent, or when the research offers a benefit to the health of the child that cannot be obtained through treatment outside the context of research. In the latter condition, guardian permissions overrides child consent to participate. They give you example. Okay, same give take example of the suicidal ideation. Suicidal ideation. And then some of you can become or will become counselors, okay? And school counselors. So you work in school. You work at school, and then when you conducted this mental health training, and then you found that your student in your school have mental health problems. Say, for example, they have high tendency towards uh, suicidal ideation, okay, suicidal behavior. They have kecenderungan, okay, they demonstrate kecenderungan untuk bunuh diri. Okay? If you ask them to come and participate for further assessment or refer them to clinical psychologists, they are not going to agree with you. Okay, especially for teenagers who are basically still in the stage of identity conflict, for example, rebellious, so they don't want to share with us adults. Okay, they don't want to share with their parents. So how can you or what can you do? Okay, according to these from consent research standard, okay, we have the opportunity to go and acquire permission from their parents, especially if it involves urgent and immediate danger. Okay, it's urgent and immediate danger. So why? Because child's age, maturity, their psychological state, and health status have give us opportunity or permission to go and seek permission from their legal guardian, okay, their parents, okay, their other significant siblings of significant family. Consequently, children should never be asked to assent or dissent to participate if their choice will not be respected. Okay? What it means is, say for example, again, you are school counselor, okay, and then you are required to conduct mental health commission, mental health screening, and then the one who asks you to conduct mental health screening is the parents, or the ones who ask you to conduct the screening is the headmaster, who's being ordered by the Parents Teachers Association, okay, by the PIBG of the school. Okay, so basically, they already give you the consent. Okay, in that case, you don't require, it does not require you to ask the consent from the children, okay, from the underage children. Why? Because their legal guardian already give their permission or give their approval for you to conduct the mental health screening. In such situation, okay, if say for example, whatever the students say, the children say is not going to give an effect, okay, whether they agree or they disagree to join the research, is not going to give an effect to our research or to their participation in the research, just don't ask them. Why? Children should never be asked to assent, to agree, or to dissent, to disagree, to participate if their choice will not be respected. Okay? If their choice is not going to give an impact. In such situation, when it is in the child's best interest, he or she may have his or her opinion sought and considered, but be made aware that the parents will make the final decision. If again you still want to ask or want to give informed consent to the children, okay, but you need to inform that whether they agree or to disagree is on the condition, okay, dengan syarat their parents is going to agree. If they disagree, their parent agree, then we still are going to follow the parent decision instead of the children or the participants decision. Okay. Still continue on parental permission and child assent to pediatric clinical trials. The decision to obtain child's agreement or the disagreement for pediatric clinical trials requires careful reflection on the goodness of fit between the research design and children assent capacity, as well as a balancing of respect for the child's developing autonomy and parents' duty and responsibility to make decisions in their child's best interest. Okay? Pediatric clinical trials usually is not yet confirmed. Okay, not yet confirmed. Say for example, we have younger siblings. Okay, we have younger children in our neighborhood or our own students. Say for example, have developmental problems. They have, for example, dyslexia or have any learning problems. Okay, learning problems. So we have new techniques, okay, new therapy, which is not, we don't have enough support to say whether it's effective or not. So after trying all of the current methods, current therapy techniques is not effective. So there is a new technique. The new technique, not enough empirical support yet. There are the new cara. There are new methods for us to conduct the therapy. Maybe the combination between physical therapy and medication, but the therapy is not yet tested. So if you want to try on the children, okay, you need to make sure that it's basically our trial is basically must be good fit, okay, for the children character, age and development, and then their status, okay, their mental status, their physical status, their emotional status. We need to balance all of that. So we need to make sure that it's the best possible alternative for them to make sure to get them involved in the trial. When deciding whether it's ethically appropriate to obtain child assent in pediatric clinical trial, psychologists should consider the following. There are 8 factors. Sorry, 6. There are 6 factors that we need to consider in order for us to not accept adapting the children's essence instead looking for their parent essence. One, to what extent does the complexity of the research design fit the child's current experience and cognitive capacity to understand information essential to a participation decision? So say, for example, they don't have enough understanding on the factors, then we can ask the parents. If they are able to understand, if they are able to follow, provided their mental condition at that particular time is okay, they are not under the influence of drugs, okay, they are not under episodes of basically schizophrenia or bipolar, or they are basically mentally sound at that particular time or not particularly sound, okay, they are too stressful, for example. So basically they have the rights to be informed and ask permission. And can the language levels and the content of the actions be sufficiently modified to enhance their understanding? Okay. Say for example that you are conducting in Malay and then they don't really understand the standard Malay, you need to use the slangs of their place. Okay, if you go to Kedah and then you need to speak Lorat Kedah, okay, their dialects. Okay, if you go to Borneo, you need to speak their dialect, for example, to make sure that they understand. And then thing to consider as well, what is the child's current understanding and appreciation of his or her mental health status and treatment needs, and how would this affect his or her reaction to information provided during a session. So we need to understand what is their understanding and appreciation of their mental health status and treatment needs. The problem of mental health is not like a physical health. Okay, physical health, they feel the pain. Okay, they have cut on their hand. Okay, they feel the pain. They go to doctors, and doctors say that you need to bandage your cut, okay, on your hand. Okay, but mental health, sometimes the person doesn't feel that they have the problem. People who are stressed, for example, they deny it. They are stressful. Okay, people who have these negative thoughts such as suicidal ideation, they don't feel that basically is something is problematic about themselves. Okay, they just think that they are not good enough, they are the problem in the world. If they are not here, they are going to give other people more benefits instead of if they are here, they are giving a lot of people problems. Okay, so they don't feel that it's a problematic thing. Okay, if they are under this condition, it's basically their evaluation, their judgment is not normal. So what we can do is we can ask permission from from their parents, from their guardians. Which aspect of the research settings or nature of the research may create participant stress or affect the child or parent understanding of the voluntary nature of participation and the distinction between research and treatment. Okay. So I only have a couple of times some opportunity to conduct experiment. Okay, it's very hard, it's very difficult to find participants who agreed to join the experiment. If you conduct the experiments like AB design, okay, AB design means that you give one group treatment, another group as a control condition. Okay, say for example, you want to conduct research with respondent, but you want to know the effectiveness of your treatment. So some respondent is going to be put in control group. Okay, I hope you understand what is control group. Okay, some group will be put in experimental group, but we are not going to inform the respondent that you are going to be assigned to control group or you are going to be assigned to experimental group. Of course, if we are going to tell them that, they are going to be confounding our hypothesis, and they are going to react. Most probably, people who are being assigned to control group will not agree to join our experiment. So usually we withheld, okay, we hold the information from them. Okay, we're not going to inform them. So in this condition, okay, which aspect of research settings or nature of research may create participant stress or affect the children or parent understanding of voluntary nature? So if, say, for example, that they know that they are not going to be assigned to experimental group, okay, they are going to be assigned to control group, so they don't want to join or they don't want to participate in our experiment. So we need to make it clear to them and we cannot withhold them, okay? So what happened? Okay, what happened is after our experiment, we are going to promise that if your son or your daughter, okay, your children are being assigned to control group, and if we found that the therapy is effective, we are going to conduct the same therapy to your children later after we get the data, we get the result. Okay, that is basically the ethical part that we need to make sure. Okay, and we are not going to tell who is going to be assigned to experimental group and who is going to be assigned to the control group. Okay, number 4, what is the family's history of shared decision making for the child's health-related matters, and how might this affect the child's emotional readiness and willingness to make a participation in decision? Okay, in some cases, the parents are too authoritarian. Okay, parents are too control. The parents is basically deciding everything for their children without the consent and for not for the benefits of the children. Okay, it's happened. Okay, it's happened a lot nowadays. Say for example, you want to do a clinical trial, okay, about a new therapy technique, and then you give that if any parents allow their children to participate, they are going to receive food coupon from Tesco, from Mydin, in the amount of 200 ringgit every 2 weeks. Okay. Say, for example, your experiments will take 1 month. Okay, so it's basically they will receive 400 ringgit. Okay, 400 ringgit for the family. And then if they are parents who are manipulative, they want the money, they want the coupon. Okay, so basically they don't care about the interest of the children, the interest of their sons and daughters. So they want to take it. Okay, basically not for the interest of the children, okay, not because of their health-related matters. It's just because of the incentive. So if you know that family history is like that, okay, parents who are manipulative, parents who are basically take advantage of their children. So you are not supposed to recruit the children because you know that the children will basically disagree or not willing to participate, and basically they are forced to participate by their family members. Okay, by their family members. It happens a lot nowadays. If you look at in our culture, okay, when their parents, okay, not a good one, I think, who ask their children to go back for money, okay, back for money, while the parents basically do nothing at home, or basically don't work, okay, don't basically find the financial sources. So, but they know that Malaysian, okay, for example, who have high level of sympathy, they will give donations to children who ask for donations. Okay, so they just go and send their children to any other marketplace, supermarket, or restaurants, and ask their children to beg for money. Okay, why? Basically they don't have any problems. Okay, it's just that they use their children to make money or to find money for them. Okay, that's an example of this case. Okay, if you know the history of the family is like that, then we need to avoid from taking these children to taking these children to participate in the study because their children, their parents or their guardians taking advantage on them. Okay. Number 5, how might the child's behavioral problems that brought the family to the research yield different parent and child reaction to information about the study, especially when the disorder to be treated has been associated with family conflict? Okay. Examples of child abuse. Okay, child abuse which created delinquent behavior among the children. Okay, the delinquent behavior is because the result of the marriage problems among the parents, and then parents abuse the child. And then in this case also, for us to ask for consent from the children and from parents, we need to consider many other factors. Okay, in fact, it's not advisable for us to take it on the basis of children's assent only, or on the basis of the parents' assent only. Okay, maybe we need to ask for permissions and then inform maybe we need to ask for advice from the relevant authorities first, okay, such as enforcing officer or Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat, in order for us to get them involved in our study. Does the research offer a benefit to the health of the child that cannot be obtained through treatment outside the context of research? Okay, the example that I give, that we have a new therapy, we want to know whether that therapy techniques is going to be effective for children who have attention deficit disorder, who have problems to pay attention in class, for example. But besides our treatment, okay, besides the treatment that we want to offer, there are other established treatments, okay? Cognitive behavioral therapy, okay, CBT, for example, who has been found to be effective in treating attention deficit disorder. So basically, we cannot force them to participate, okay, in order and promise them basically this is the best therapy for their children, because there are other alternatives. Okay, there are other alternatives. So for their own benefits, okay, their mental health benefits, for their health benefits, we need to refer them to CBT first, cognitive behavioral therapy, instead of asking them to join to be a participant for our clinical trial. Okay, 10:07. We take a 10-minute break. Okay, we take 10 minutes break. We will continue back at 10:20. 10:20. Okay, kita rehat sebentar. 10:20 kita sambung balik. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so next consideration, when we want to assure, okay, informed consent and to research, we need to also consider if our consultation, if our research involve community, if it involve community. And sometimes the people who conducted ethnographic research, okay, we want to see how the lifestyle of a particular community affects personality development, for example. So the observation, okay, the unit of analysis involves community, a group of people. So it involves community consultation. Community can refer to individuals of a common geographic area, economic status, ethnic group, or religion. Okay, or say for example, in your case, okay, student, okay, there are many research in student conducted. They want to see the difference in personality between international students and local students. So they observe okay, students who are coming from other countries, okay, from Indonesia, from China, okay, from Arab countries, from Europe, okay. You want to observe how the community socializations okay, affects or relate to their personality. So it could involve in that sense of community aspect. However, within this larger definition of communities are subgroups who share similar mental health disorders or are confronting similar barriers to employment, education, housing, or quality healthcare. When these subgroups are the focus of research, their interests may not be congruent with those of the larger community. I'll give you an example. Okay, I'll give you an example. Previously in my university, we have many international students. Okay, we have many international students, and then there one particular officer who says something which is insensitive in a way that different culture have different of the interpretations of what we call um, interpretations of beauty and fashion. Okay, beauty and fashion. So when you regard a particular culture as not pretty, or in other words, they don't demonstrate a particular standards of tidiness, okay, looks good, look calm, look very tidy. So it basically involves judgment between culture, judgment between culture. But we have to bear in mind that those judgment is basically being made from the perspective of the person's own cultural interpretation. Okay, so we cannot impose our own cultural interpretation on other people's culture. So if you can regard in your own community what is pretty, what is not pretty from your own perspective, but you want to judge other cultural perspective, you need to look at it from their own perspective, from their own cultural views. Okay. So under the principle D, okay, in standard psychology, justice requires that the designs of informed consent information adequately reflect the research risks and benefits of participants who are marginalized within their communities. Within their communities. Okay, in some aspect, when I was doing my research before, from some cultural perspective, they feel offended if their women's okay their ladies in from their community being interviewed directly by a man, okay, by a male interviewer. So you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of that because of what consents also involve informing who are going to conduct the interview, who are going to seek the information, who are going to pass all of the research materials and apparatus. Seeking community consultation and establishing community advisory boards. It is not IRB, it is CAB, Community Advisory Boards, thus requires an understanding of the social structures and relationships that define a particular community and identification of persons who can best represent participants' research relevant concerns. In other words, say for example, we are from Malaysia, we want to conduct research in Vietnam. Okay, we need to consult okay their community on the advice. What are the taboos? What are do's and don'ts that we should and we should not do when we conducted or collecting data in their community. Okay, so we need to refer or we need to seek advice from their community as well. Okay, so next is informed consent for qualitative research. Okay, why qualitative research has specific requirement? Because some qualitative methods requires different perspectives. Okay, for example, the open-ended nature of ethnographic, phenomenological, and participant observation studies can make it difficult to anticipate the exact nature of information that can be gained through participant investigator interaction. Okay, so qualitative research is not only limited to interview. Okay, whether it's one-on-one interview, focus group discussions, it also involves a more open-ended, such as ethnographic. Ethnographic is basically you go there. Okay, say for example, you want to study about community in Vietnam. Okay, Muslim community in Vietnam, for example. You go there, you live with them. Okay, you stay there for 3 months, for 6 months. You try to understand what are their activities, what are their values, what are the practice that they are doing, and how they shape their culture there. So you try to understand by living with them, okay, ethnographers. Phenomenological is basically you want to study from the narrative perspective, how they describe an event, okay, how they elaborate, how they explain an event that happened to them, okay. And then participant observation is basically you don't tell them that you are basically researcher. Instead, you join them. Okay, you join them and you become participant yourself. But in actuality, you are basically the researcher who want to observe the behavior of the participant. Okay, so in this aspect, we are basically involved with our participants. Okay, we are interacting, we are in communicating again. So we are basically living with them. So whether the focus of discovering emergent themes in qualitative research means that investigators do not always know beforehand privacy and confidentiality issues that may emerge during the course of research. During the course of research. Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, say for example, ethnographers. Ethnographers. So you go there, you want to study how they live. Okay, and then when you go and live with them, and then you see them when they are teenagers reach a certain age, so they make compulsory for circumcision, okay, or they make compulsory for the person to get married, for example. And those information basically they don't want to tell you. Okay, those information is basically for them is confidential and they don't want to tell you. While in our research protocol, in our research procedures, we already inform them what are information that we want to focus, what are the information that we will take, what are the information that we don't interested in. Okay, so when those information appear during the research, okay, during the observation, during you living with them, so it another issue of confidentiality appears. So you need to make them clear that, or they also need to make to understand that that aspect involves confidentiality, and you should not report on that, or if you want to report on that, you need to make sure that information which is sensitive to the culture, sensitive to the participant, is basically safeguarded, is protected. Investigators should alert the prospective participant to this possibility during informed consent. Monitor verbal or behavioral information during the course of the study and remind the participant about confidentiality protections and limitations when unexpected subjects arise. I'll give you example of the marriage study before. Okay? So you want to study about marriage issues. What are the issues that occur, that happen, that cause the satisfaction or happiness during marriage life? So you need to inform them that there's some personal information that you are not interested in, okay, in personal information. But when explaining about the husband and wife relationship and blah 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 blah, there's some sensitive information come out. Okay, at that particular time, as an interviewer, you need to inform your interviewee, your informant, that those information it should not be explained to you. Okay, so it could appear that some confidentiality aspects is not specified early on because the nature is subjective. Okay, the nature of our research is subjective. So it could appear during the session, and those information will be protected, or the investigator or the interviewer could stop from a respondent from giving this information to you. In a new direction of inquiry emerged that might be in conflict with a participant's confidentiality expectation, these should be identified and the participant given the opportunity to reconsent. Okay? Say for example, you are investigating the marriage issue. Okay, the marriage issue and their satisfaction towards their marriage life. And then the husband also already give that. I'm going to give the information, but information about my previous marriage should not be mentioned. Okay, say for example, the husband have prior marriage before, and then maybe they are divorced, or the wife passed away and then remarried. Then what you want to focus only the marriage of the to a particular for his current wife, okay, for his current partner. But here he mentioned that no information about his previous marriage should be mentioned. Okay, but when talked with the husband, with the wife, and then the wife uh, somehow inform you about the problem could occur because of her husband's previous experience with his previous wife. So that is basically confidential issues that the husband basically don't want to disclose or to discuss. So you need to make sure that the new direction, okay, is in line with confidentiality aspect or not. If it's not aligned, you need to ask again for the confirmation of consent, approval. Okay, if it's not approved, then you need to stop the conversation. In observational field studies involving drug use or other illegal behaviors, an agreement can be reached during informed consent about which activities will and will not be asked or witnessed. If you are observing something which is illegal, what are the things that you want to observe, what are the things that you don't want to observe. Okay, because it involves a legal perspective as well. Okay, so next, when we want to assure, okay, we want to ask for informed consent, we also need to consider explanation about control groups and method of assignment to treatment condition. Okay, this is what I've discussed, I've touched briefly before this. The principle of good scientific design often require investigators to assign some participant to control group condition as a point of comparison for the experimental treatment. Okay, vary the treatment and control condition for individual participants within group design and between group design. Okay, so when it involves different conditions, different treatment. Okay, like we discussed before, if some participant you will assign them to experimental group. So these are the group that will receive a real treatment or will receive real medication. Okay, they are basically at an advantage. But we will also assign participants to control group to make comparison, to make sure that to have a conclusion that our therapy, our new treatment, our new medication is effective. However, assigning them involves informed consent as well. The control condition may consist of participants receiving different levels of investigational intervention. A treatment of documented effectiveness, currently available services, measure a placebo or no treatment. Okay, so under provision 2 and 3 of standard 8.02b require that informed consent adequately describe the nature, the potential risk, and the probable benefits of control group assignment, as well as how assignment to experimental group and control group conditions will be made. Okay, so we need to inform them whether we are doing a simple random, okay, a systematic assignment, okay, simple random assignment or systematic assignment, or we are not doing between group design, we are doing within group design, okay, between groups. So it assigns one group or respondent into experimental group, one group respondent into a control group. So we compare between those groups. Okay, within group design is basically we are not assigning them to any group. So we only have one group. But on Monday we give treatment. Okay, on Tuesday we don't give treatment. Okay, we give them placebo. On Tuesday we give treatment again. Okay, on Wednesday we don't give treatment. So they have different conditions. We call within subject design or within group design. So within group design can eliminate some problems of issues that is not basically fair for all our participants. But not all research have the opportunity to conduct within subject design or between subject design only. So sometimes you need to cater for both. Sometimes you can only use for one. Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, give you an example. So one of my at the beginning of the semester, what I did for my other classes. So I've tried various methods. Okay, I've tried various methods to see which methods that being more effective for online teaching. Okay, for teaching on using WebEx and etc. So I use three methods. So using WebEx like this one, and then a pre-recorded video and edited video, and the second one and the third one I use a video, video. So in this condition, okay, in this part, so the week that I use WebEx as my platform of teaching, and there are other weeks that I use asynchronous class, which I recorded the video and share with my students in e-learning, and the other classes that I use Prezi video. Okay, so this could be similar to within group design. Okay, they are not assigning students who are going to only receive WebEx only, or are not assigning students who are going to watch the pre-recorded video only. Okay, so I rotated it. Okay, some weeks I use WebEx, some other weeks I use video, some other weeks I use asynchronous edited pre-recorded video. So basically this is similar to the concept of within group design. So all the respondents receive the same treatments, but they are different treatments according to different times. Okay, so explanation. So in our informed consent, we need to explain to all respondents about how we are going to assign them, whether to experimental groups or whether to control groups, or we are using within group, which is we are going to receive some treatments and then some placebo and then some treatment and some placebo. Okay, we are just mentioning the procedure. So we're not informing them the details. Okay, this week's experimental, next week's control. Week after that, control again. Week after that, experimental. Okay, we're not going to tell them the details. We're just informing them whether how we are going to assign them and whether they are going to be different treatments or similar treatments to all participants. Okay, similar again on explanation of control groups and methods of assignment. When appropriate, the nature of random assignment should be explained in language that can be understood by individuals unfamiliar with the scientific method. Okay? Not all of our participants have the opportunity to study about experimental design. Okay, so we need to lower down our levels, simplify our terminologies, our jargon that we use to make sure that they understand what is the procedures required. Informed consent for studies using single or double-blind procedures should describe the extent to which participants and members of the treatment and research team will know which group or the participant has been assigned to and steps that will be taken to determine if and how the blind will be broken. Okay, single blind or double blind. Okay, single blind means that when I assign you to control group or to experimental group, you will not know whether you are receiving treatment or you are receiving placebo. Okay, do you want me to elaborate about placebo? You can just answer yes or no on in our chat box. Do you want me to explain placebo? Okay, yes. So the thing is like this. Okay. So I believe that, or maybe you are taking experiment research method this semester, or maybe you have took it. So this is basically a refreshment. Okay, basically a revision. Okay, when we conducted the research, okay, especially experimental research, okay, we want to know. Say for example, I want to know the effectiveness of using online teaching instead of physical teaching. Okay, online teaching and physical teaching. So online teaching is basically my experimental condition. Okay, so I'm taking one group. Okay, I'm taking one group. Say for example, your group. So your group will be become my experimental group. So I'm giving you the treatment. It is I'm teaching you using online WebEx. So there are other groups who are using traditional teaching method. Okay, conventional teaching method, which is coming to class and I'm teaching them using slide or using using PowerPoint or just using lecture, just give lecture or using the whiteboard. So the whiteboard is basically the conventional method is basically the normal conventional one. So group who are in uh, the category or students who are in the group who have to come to class, follow the physical class using the conventional method. So they are basically in control group. So they are basically receiving placebo who don't have any effects. They don't have any effects. Obviously, because it's normal condition. So you are in this group, you are receiving treatment condition. Okay, you are receiving experimental condition. The usual example that research method lecturers use is basically on the medication. On the medication. Say, for example, we are developing a new drug. The drugs here means medication lah. Okay, ubat. The new Panadol. Okay, the new Panadol, but this Panadol is to reduce stress. Okay, to reduce stress. So how can we know that this Panadol is effective? So what we can do is we take two groups of people who are experiencing stress. Okay, so we put one group into experimental group, another group into control group. Okay, control group. So how can we know that the new medication will reduce your stress? So we give in experimental group, we give them the new medication, okay, the new Panadol already discussed. So we cannot give nothing to control group. Otherwise, they will know that they are basically control group. Okay, they will see that, oh, basically we don't have any treatment. So we also give them some medication. Okay, it look the same. Okay, it smell the same. The size is the same, but it's basically just a plain water. Okay, or just a plain candy without any effects. Okay, that is basically placebo. Okay, we give something which has no effect on the our target variable. So we might give them candy. Okay, we might give them some things look like Panadol but have no drugs or no ingredient in that. So we give placebo. Why? Because so that we can compare on the effectiveness of the new drugs, okay, the new medication, whether they can really reduce stress or not. See, that's why we give them placebo. Placebo is basically something that we give to the respondents, to the participants, to the experiments subjects, which have no no effect. That's why it involves some aspect of ethical consideration. So if, say, for example, the new drug is really effective, so we have to give to the control group respondents the same medication after this experiment. So single blind, okay, coming back, single blind. So the respondent do not know whether they are in control group or they are in experimental group, whether they receive real medication or whether they receive placebo. Okay, double blind is not only that the respondent do not know whether they are in control group or they are in experimental group, the one who administer it also do not know. Okay, so bukan sahaja student tak tahu mereka ini adalah in experimental group ataupun in a control group, tetapi pensyarah itu sendiri pun tak tahu sama ada dia sedang memberikan eksperimen atau memberikan experimental condition, experimental treatment, or dia sedang memberikan placebo. Okay. So how is it possible? How it could be that administrator don't know? The researcher know, but the one who administer it do not know. So it's double blind. So both the receiver or the participant of the experiment do not know, and the administrator of the experiment also do not know whether they are giving experimental condition or experimental substance, or they are giving placebo to the so it's single blind and double blind. So explanation about control group and method of assignment to the treatment condition also consider whether how they are going to be assigned to single or double blind. Double blind aspect. Double blind is is a good alternative to single blind, because sometimes the treatment of the person who has to give the therapy, who has to give the condition, can give an indication or can have an effect on the participant as well. Okay, next part to consider in informed consent is the right to refuse participation without penalty. So in provision 4 of standard 8.02b addresses the need to ensure that research participation is voluntary. Okay, is voluntary. Individuals who apply for or who already received non-experimental services at the study site may fear that failure to participate will result in deterioration or removal of existing services. Okay? Same like I mentioned before, the compensation, the incentive that we give to our respondent, okay, to our participant. So they may be afraid that if they withdraw, when they don't feel comfortable with the research, they don't feel comfortable with the experiment, it creates more stress to them joining our research. So they want to withdraw. But if they want to withdraw, and then they're afraid that if they withdraw, there will be some penalty, some negative consequences of their withdrawal. Okay, say for example, I ask you to answer a survey, and then you answer it, and then in the middle of the survey, you don't feel that, oh, this is very sensitive, I don't like this question, I don't want to answer. But because I am your lecturer, so you're afraid that if you stop answering it now, it will cost you your mark. or you will not receive the token of appreciation, for example. So informed consent procedures must assure participants currently receiving services that dissent or disapproval will not disrupt their ongoing treatment and inform individuals new to the treatment facility of available alternative services. This standard does not require psychologists to describe or provide treatment alternative when they are not otherwise available. So say for example, you are currently receiving the therapy and then I ask you to involve in some activities and then research activities and then you don't feel comfortable. So as part of the researcher, when they withdraw participation in our research, we need to continue giving them the therapy. And that is partly basic of that's basically ethical standard we need to follow. So when they withdraw, we cannot stop the giving them the therapy. Okay, giving them the therapy because it's basically their right to refuse participation without penalty. Cost and compensation. Another consideration in our informed consent to research. The treatments provided in intervention research may be provided at no cost, okay, at no cost to the participant through federal or private funding of the research, thus to the participant or bill through a participant health plan. So we should not ask them to pay. Okay, we should not ask them to, we should not charge them, or we should not be, charge even their medical card or their insurance. Understanding the financial cost and the extent to which third-party payers will be aware of diagnosis and services received during a research study is essential for informed decision making. Let's say, for example, like this. We want to conduct a research, okay, but it requires some cost. It requires some cost. Okay, we want to conduct, want to know whether students' new learning techniques will improve their English proficiency. Okay, but in order to do that, we have to involve other consultant, an English consultant, for example, okay, consultant who can improve student English proficiency. So we don't have that budget. Okay, we don't have the financial budgets to cover for paying for the consultant. So what we do is we go and do research in a school, and then we have the evidence that majority of the students don't have appropriate English proficiency level. So we providing these services to improve the English. So by involving third party, okay, this English consultant. So instead of we paying the consultant, so now we ask the school to pay for the consultant. So from research ethics, it's not appropriate. Why? Because those participants is will basically contribute to our research. So if, for example, they know that they need to pay, so they need to pay. So it's basically we need to inform them early. Maybe when we are asking for permission or approval from the school. In some cases, participants may be provided monetary compensation for participation. Provision 5 requires that prospective participants are given sufficient information about the nature of such financial arrangement to make an informed decision about participation. So if you are giving them some token of appreciation, okay, some reward, some incentive, so we need to specify and detail it out. Okay, so those are all the considerations that we need to do. We need to evaluate. We need to make sure in our informed consent procedure to conduct research. So there are a lot. Like I mentioned, it's like discussing a new standard by yourself. So informed consent to research. So nowadays, a lot of research, especially qualitative research, they also ask for recording, okay, audio recordings or taking pictures or video recording. So there are specific standards catering for informed consent for recording voices and images. Okay. Psychologists obtain informed consent from research participants prior to recording their voices or images for data collection, unless, okay, unless first The research consists solely of naturalistic observation in public spaces and is not anticipated that the recording will be used in a manner that could cause personal identification or harm. The research design includes deception, and consent for the use of the recording is obtained during the recording. Okay, I think maybe most of us have occasionally watched Just for Laugh. Okay, Just for Laugh clips. Okay, ataupun prank. Okay, prank clips. So prank clips, okay, it basically involve deception or involve deception in this case that we don't inform them early, we inform them after. So say for example, you want to see whether people have pro-social behavior. Okay, pro-social. If you are taking social psychology, you should be familiar with pro-social behavior. Okay, the problem of us psychologists, we like to invent terms. Okay, use terms that not really familiar. It's pro-social behavior is basically helping behavior. The helping behavior. So what you do is you faking. Okay, you are creating a scenario which requires people around you to help. Okay, to help the person in need. Say for example, you come into UTMs and then you make a situation whereby your motorbike is broken, and then you want to see how many people who passed away the place that you are parking your motorbike, okay, your motorcycle, will offer help. Okay, you want to see whether people will show pro-social behavior. People will show pro-social behavior. So say for example in this, you are basically involved in quasi-experiment. The quasi-experiment is not a totally experiment. It's an experiment conducted in public or in natural situation that you don't have fully control. Okay, you don't have full control. If you do experiment in lab, you can control with all other factors. But if you do experiment in public, it's not actually an experiment because you don't have the amount of control with what's going to happen. So you are using quasi-experiment. So quasi-experiment. So in this naturalistic observation, like in public places, so if you want to record the voices, the images, you want to record the audio, the video recording, so you can do that provided that you inform them right afterwards. Okay, you need to inform them. The research design include deception and consent for the use of the recording is obtained during debriefing. Okay, what is the meaning of debriefing? After the research, we tell them the whole story of our research, the main purpose, what we are looking for after that. Okay, that's why if you happen to watch the Just for Laugh or the prank video, they don't leave the respondent like that. Okay, after that, okay, they don't leave the target participant like that. So after that, they go and inform them, okay, this actually we are doing this research. And then in that debriefing, you need to ask for informed consent. Say for example, okay, you are standing beside the road and you with the so-called your broken motorcycle. Okay, motorcycle have problems there, so you are waiting, and then one person passed by without doing anything, and then second person passed by and then offer help. They offer help, and the third person passed by and offer help. The fourth person passed by, don't offer help, don't do anything. Okay, you cannot record their image. You cannot videotape or video record them without their consent. You can record them during that time, but after the end of your experiment, your quasi experiment, or after they pass by, you need to stop them. You need to inform that you are actually doing social research, and then you need to ask their permission. Are you allowed me uh, to record your image, okay, to video record your image. Even though, and then you inform them that you're going to block their face and their plate number if they are driving motor car or motorcycle. They block their number so people will not know. If they agree to that, then you can record. If you don't agree to that, you cannot use it for your data, and then you have to delete it. The psychologist must obtain informed consent to electronically record research participation before beginning data collection, except for quasi-experiment that you have to do. In normal research, you need to ask for permission. Short auditory and video record pose a greater risk of personal identification over time than do other data formats, and therefore, consent procedures must allow individuals to evaluate the personal consequences of such risk prior to research participation. Okay. In my previous research, I did interview some prominent figure in New States. Okay. Very prominent figures. So in my informed consent, I informed that their recording. At that time, I don't video record, I only take recording. So I only do audio recording. So I informed that I'm going to transcribe. Okay, I'm going to do transcription for the recording, and then I'm going to do data. I'm going to do the qualitative analysis, the thematic analysis. So and then I informed that the data will be kept for 5 years, and then after 5 years, I'm going to delete the information. And then I have to inform them where the data that I'm going to store them. Where means that not the place. So I'm going to store them in the CD or in the thumb drive on the hard disk with protected password. Only me and my supervisors know about the password and the data. And then after 5 years, I have to delete that. And you have to do it. Okay, after 5 years, you have to delete it. Okay, otherwise you are not assuring, you are not doing, I think you are not following the ethical standards for informed consent, for recording voices and okay. Same under this aspect, restricting data access to the research team best protect personal identification. Okay. And then in some instances, recording used for training purposes of presentation at professional meeting, participants can be informed about confidentiality protection such as image scrambling, transcripts, voice distortion, or other identity masking techniques. When I presented for my Viva, uh, one of the examiner asked me the identity of the institution that I've collected my data. Okay, however, in my research procedure, I inform that I'm not going to disclose the identity of the institution to any party except me and my two supervisors. I have main supervisor, I have co-supervisor for my PhD. So only three of us know which institution that we are collecting data. And then one of the examiners keep on asking, I am collecting data to which institution? So I cannot answer it because if I answer that, I basically already committing unethical research procedures, research aspect. What I did is basically I told the examiner and all of the examiners and the chair of the Viva, I told them I can inform them provided that they sign the non-disclosure agreement, okay, or informed consent by themselves. So the chair decided that I don't have to mention, I only have to describe the characteristic of the institution. It's very important. It is very important for us to adhere to. Otherwise, our participants will lose their trust in us, and research in the future will have problems. People don't want to voluntarily become our participants. If identifiable data are to be shared with other investigators, informed consent must provide participants with information regarding who will have the access to and the nature of the question addressed by the data. So, like I mentioned, we need to inform that only who are the people, who are the person, who are the parties that have access to the data. Okay, like me, I mentioned that only me and my supervisors have access to the data. The inclusion of the phrase prior to recording their voices or image for data collection allows us to record the consent procedure itself for documentation or other legitimate purposes as long as participant permission is obtained in advance and recording ceases in the individual refuses to participate. So in this case, when we want to record audio record or video record, okay, the first question, okay, the first part when we start recording, we have to ask them, okay, before we start, I would like to confirm again, do you agree to be video recorded? Okay, are you agreed to be audio recorded? Okay, so why? So that is the first thing that the consent that's being given by the participant is recorded. Okay, is recorded. So that what is meant by the inclusion of phrase prior to recording their voices, and then then record the consent process itself for documentation. So we need to record that. So there are some exceptions. There's some exceptions for us to ask for informed consent for recording voices and images. Okay. Investigators, may record the voices and images of person without their consent for three conditions. First, observation occur in a public setting in which one would have no reasonable expectation of privacy. For example, a public park or hotel lobby or street corner. So we don't have to ask for permission if it occur in public setting, like I mentioned, the quasi experiment. Okay. However, if you are showing their face, if you are showing their any information that can implicate identity of the person, then you have to blur or you have to cover those information, and then you have to inform them that basically you are doing research. Procedures do not disturb or manipulate the natural surrounding. Okay, so why I said that if you're doing those kind of quasi experiment, you faking the problem with your bike or with your motorcycles. So it's not natural. You are creating that situation. So that's why you need to inform them. Protection are in place to guard against personal identification and harm, especially when the behaviors observed place participant at legal or social risk, such as vandalism. Say, for example, you want to do this social experiment again, the quasi experiment, and then what you want to do is basically you want to see whether hours, okay, the time will affect people adherence or people's desire to follow public traffic regulation, okay, sama ada dia orang akan langgar lampu merah ataupun tidak. So what you do is you hypothesize that the times is play a significant effect on whether people will follow the rules or not. If people will follow the rules, if it's basically in during peak hours or during hours that a lot of other cars using the streets. However, in the non-peak hours, okay, during nights or early in the mornings, okay, or in the middle of the night, okay, say for example 11, 10, 12 a.m. in the morning, okay. So people will not observe, people will not follow the traffic light. So what you do, you are observing cars in the traffic light. Okay, you sit somewhere that people don't cannot see you. So you see how many cars pass by the traffic light, even though it's on the red light. Okay, how many cars still observe the rules, uh, even though there are no cars in the middle of the night. Okay, in the middle of the night. So in this part, you are basically you don't have to you say for example if um you share the recording, okay, there are cars who are basically not following the traffic rules, okay, traffic rules and regulation. So basically if you send those pictures or footage to police, okay, to the traffic officers, the driver might get summoned for it. He's summoned for it. Okay. So you need to make sure that when you're doing that, you are protecting their personal identification. Okay. So you cannot show the number plate of the car. Otherwise, they will have problem with the in the legal perspective. The investigators conducting deception research that meets the requirement of standard 8.07. Later, we're going to discuss on deception can receive approval from their institutional review board to waive the requirement to obtain consent for recording prior to data collection, but they must seek permission to use recording for data analysis from participants during the briefing. Recording must be described if the participant declines permission. This is why I mentioned that when you do research that involve recording, Okay, even though it's about further experiment doing in such a social setting, and then you want to use it for data analysis, okay, you still have to ask for informed consent. Still have to ask for informed consent, and then if they don't agree to, you need to delete it. You cannot use it. Okay, you cannot use it. Okay, unless it's basically a natural phenomena like observing the traffic lights. If you are involving people passing by, looking on post social behavior, then you need to ask permission, even if it's your friend. It's your friend. You want to know whether your friends are heavy users of social media. Okay, heavy user of social media. So what you did is you ask them to add you for their social media. Okay, add you in Instagram, add you in their Facebook friend. Okay, add you follow you, or you follow them in their Twitter. So what you do is you basically try to do research on them, try to collect data on them based on their social media posting. Okay. So this part you also need to ask for permission. Okay? You cannot just simply observe them without permission. And worst case scenario, if you are disclosing their identity in your report. Okay. My friend is 22 years old, male, from Kedah, previously study in MRSM. Okay, he has many siblings, okay, blah, 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 blah. Basically, those information, even though you don't disclose the name, people can identify who is the person. So basically, is you need to inform consent. And in fact, you cannot do that because you are breaching. Okay, you are not following confidentiality issue. Confidentiality issue. So that is basically the standard for 8.03, informed consent for recording voices and images. And then, what is the time now? So 11:10. We will have another 10 minutes break, okay, before we continue our discussion on client, patient, student, and subordinate research participant. So we continue at 11:20. Okay, we take a break first. Okay, let's continue. It seems that it's very difficult for us to cover the whole chapter. I will cover for another this last one, okay, and then we'll continue the rest of the standards in the next class. Okay. Some of you are hungry. I am also hungry, but the problem is my neighbors are very hungry. My, some of my friends who are living beside me. Okay, usually I don't have class on Sunday, so that's why they are waiting for me. Never mind. We will we will continue for this one. So the next part for us to consider for informed consent is client or our patient or student and subordinate research participant. In other words, if you are lecturer and then your participant of your research are your student, okay, or you are clinical psychologist, you are clinical psychologist, and then you ask your client, okay, your patient, to be to join your research, okay, or you are supervisor, okay, you are HR manager, or you are industrial organization psychologist executive at your company, and then you ask your subordinate, okay, employees which is under your jurisdiction, under your purview, to join or to participate in the research. So there are two standards which is involved, okay, 8.048. When psychologists conduct research with clients or patient or student or subordinate as participants, psychologists take steps to protect the prospective participants from adverse consequences of declining or withdrawing from participation. Okay. In other words, okay, when if you are a teacher and then your students join your participate in your research and then you want to withdraw, okay, in the middle of the research, they don't feel comfortable, they don't want to continue, and then you have to accept that, and you have to make sure that there are no consequences. You need to be fair, you need to be just in evaluating your student. Same goes if you are clinical psychologist, okay? If they agree to join your research and then in the middle of research, they withdraw, they don't want to continue, you should also continue your therapy with him or with her. You should not stop your therapy because it's part of our ethical conduct. Second, when research participation is a course requirement or opportunity for extra credit, the prospective participant is given the choice of equitable alternative activities. So this involves if the researcher is a teacher or lecturer or academic or researcher. Say for example, take our case. So I'm doing research. Okay, I'm doing research. So I told you, I tell you, if you answer my survey complete early, okay, I will give 3 extra marks. Okay, 3 extra marks for those students who answer my survey. Okay, and it happened that some students don't want to answer the survey. Okay, some students don't want to answer the survey. I, as a lecturer, I, as a teacher, I need to give alternative assessment for them to also get the extra 3 marks. Okay, for students who don't want to answer the survey, you can do an article review. Okay, an article review, a short article review, 3 pages, then you will get a 3 marks. Okay, for those who want to answer the survey, you don't have to do the extra assignment or to do the article review. That's what I meant by the standard 8.04B, the second paragraph. Okay, for this particular standard, okay, standard 8.4A, okay, it requires psychologists to take specific steps, specific measures to ensure that refusal to participate does not result in a reduction in the amount of quality of services if they are clinical psychologists, or lowered grades if they are lecturer, a poor job performance evaluation if they are supervisor or boss of a particular employee, or loss of institutional privileges. Okay, say for example, they don't want to be to join the participants, then they can no longer have the bonus, or they can no longer have a medical benefit and etc. Secondly, prospective participants are aware of this protection during recruitment and throughout the course of research. Okay, sometimes the boss or the supervisor clever in not in the right way. Okay, they are clever. So they ask the participant, okay, their supervisor, okay, their underlings, okay, the officers under their purview to participate in the research. But they don't inform that if they don't participate, there will be no consequences. There will be no low evaluation. There will be no loss of institutional privileges. There will be no lower grade or etc. So they need to inform this prior to data collection. Okay, the participant must know this before, okay, not during. Okay, so that they don't have any hesitation. They don't have any problems to decline the offer, or they don't have any problems to withdraw their participation during the research. When power differentials inherent in an existing professional relationship are apparent, psychology should refrain from conducting the informed consent process and any research procedures involving direct contact with the individual. What it means here is, if the researcher is the lecturer, if the researcher is the clinical psychologist, if the researcher is the supervisor, the boss, okay? So when you want to conduct the research, you want to acquire informed consent, you want them to sign the informed consent, you want them to give the informed consent, okay, to agree to join the research. So you not supposed to ask them directly. They like to me, I'm doing the research to you. So I have to ask my research assistant to ask for informed consent to you from you. Okay, if I am clinical psychologist, I have client. Okay, I have client who I'm conducting the therapy, and then when I want him to join the research, I'm not the one who are going to ask for informed consent. I need to ask my partner or my co-researchers, or I need to ask for research assistant to ask the informed consent from the person. Okay, that's what it meant. So it's not the person. If you are the boss, you want your employees, okay, your subordinates to join the research. So you are not supposed to be the one who asks for informed consent. You need to ask other person. Why? If I ask personally, then you are going to have some hesitation. Okay, you are not sure. You don't want to join, but because I'm asking directly, so you afraid that you are going to offend me, or you're afraid that it's going to affect my evaluations towards your grade, then you reluctantly accept. Okay, paksa rela. Okay, you reluctantly accept the offer. Well, in fact, you don't want to. Okay, that's what it meant. So in some settings, it may be desirable to appoint a participant advocate to explain to a prospective participant the purpose of the study, the role of the investigator, and protection against adverse consequences of non-participation. Participant advocates means here like RA, this is assistant, my representative are going to explain to you, or other co-researchers which don't have direct influence to your grades or to the evaluation of the participant to represent us to explain the prospective participant purpose of the study, role of investigator, and then all of the rights, okay, all of the rights of the participants, and then protection against adverse consequences, and to determine if vulnerable person wish to be approached by the research team to give informed consent. Say for example, I'm asking my research assistant to ask you to join my research, and then my research assistant also need to ask you whether you are okay to be approached by me, myself, okay, by the research team, by my research co-researcher as well. Okay, if you are not feeling comfortable with that, if you don't want to meet me or other researchers, then it's okay. The research assistant will continue on dealing with you. And C, monitor the continued voluntariness of participation. Okay, sometimes they no longer voluntary, they no longer want to participate any longer. So you need to identify that basically they don't have the motivation, they don't want to participate. So you need to allow them to withdraw from your research. Okay. Okay, why we are talking specifically about patients, students, and subordinates? So even though we have stated that you have the right to withdraw anytime, okay, there will be no consequences. But because it involves other relationship, professional relationship, as a client, as a student, as a subordinate, there must be some hesitation, some perception on the part of the participants when they want to withdraw. So they might thinking it could affect their evaluation, it could affect the services, it could affect the grade. That's why it's emphasis on this aspect. Okay, so similarly, okay, conducting quality improvement or comparative effectiveness research in healthcare setting still involve gaining informed consent for client, okay, for patient or student and subordinate research participants. Okay, our participant is our own student, our participant is our own patients, our participant is basically our own subordinate. So we need to conduct quality improvement or comparative effectiveness research in for that. Okay, consistent with the standard 8.04A, the psychologists conducting these studies will need to consider the impact of practitioners and patients of introducing such protocols into normal delivery of health services. Okay, remember, among others, here is basically the practice. If you are a clinical psychologist, so when we conduct this kind of study, we need to consider the impact of the practitioners and patients of introducing such protocol into normal delivery of health services. Okay, say for example, I want to understand uh, the new um, the new digitalizations of therapy. Okay, digitalization of therapy we call as uh, eye therapy, if I'm not mistaken. So now you can receive treatment. Okay, you can receive therapy through online. Okay, but at the same time, you are basically my client. Okay, you are experiencing stress, for example. So you need to meet me once every 2 weeks. Okay, setiap 2 minggu, dia jumpa saya sekali. okay, for treatment and for evaluation. So when I want to evaluate whether the new treatment using internet, using online platform, would have the same effects or not, so I ask you to join. I ask you to participate in the research. So if, say, for example, that research activity intervene or have problem with me giving the normal delivery of my therapy physically with you, then it should not be carried out. I should not ask you to join my research because it's going to mingle around between the real therapy is part of my responsibility because of you are my patient and then the research activities. So more detailed informed consent information are required for such research. Okay, so such research may communicate possible risks and benefit of participating. They are not normally discussed during clinical care, which in turn may deter patients from participating in the research or discourage them from receiving standard services. Okay, why? Say, for example, you cannot differentiate now between your real therapy, which is a part of my responsibility as therapist, and your responsibility and your desire to get better, so getting the treatment, and then the online is the research activity. So if it's intervened or it's disturbed your normal delivery of services, okay, you don't feel comfortable, and then if you want to withdraw from the online therapies, from the research activities, you might face problem if you want to face me again in the normal therapy session, the physical therapy session, and then it's not an appropriate part to get you involved, to make them involved in our research. Okay, so that's for the case if our client is our patient. We are clinical psychologists, and the client is our patient. So in the case of you, okay, you are students, okay, in college and universities. Psychology instructors like me require or give extra course credit to undergraduate student participation in research. The pedagogical rationale for required research participation is to provide direct experience with the process of research. Yet, the requirement can be coercive to students who do not want to be involved in experimental procedures. Like I mentioned, basically, I do, say for example, I invite you, if you join in my experiment to see the effectiveness of online platform learning to your understanding and to your achievement in psychology. Okay, so I invite you, and you are my student, and you are my student. So basically, it's allowed for lecturers to do that. It's allowed. Okay, but at the same time, the lecturer needs to make sure that students understand that if you don't want to participate, there is no problem. Okay, why? Requirement can be coercive to students. The requirement can basically tie your hand and don't give you any option. Okay? I ask you to join me part of research. I give you 10 marks. If you extra 10 marks for those who participate. But I don't give you an alternative for those who don't want to participate. They don't have any option then to gain the same extra mark. So as part of the lecturer, when you are giving that kind of incentive that somehow force the student to do it, it's not permissible until or unless you give them an alternative option. Never mind if you don't want to participate in the research, but for those who want to get same extra 10 marks, you have to do the article review. That is fair. So standard 8.04b regarding the alternative addresses this concern by requiring that psychologists offer students pedagogical alternatives equivalent in time and effort to research participation, such as watching a video on research topic, summarizing an article on research techniques, or assisting in the conduct of an experiment. Okay, so basically, say for example, I want you to join my experiment, and then you don't want to join. So the requirement for students who want to take the exam, the extra mark is to follow the experiment. So the assignment, the alternative assignments must be similar to the original assignments of participate in my assignment. So I have to give assignments about review article of research of experiment, or review article using experiment method, or review theory or techniques or method of experimental method. So to give it a consistent balance for people who experience it firsthand by joining the research, or and with people who don't join it but able to gain the same knowledge, the same understanding through their review or through their alternative tasks. So lecturer cannot force you to do anything that you don't want, but punish you by not giving you the same amount, the same marks. So that's all for 8.04. Okay, now it's 11:38. I tend to stop at 11:30. But never mind, there are still a lot more to discuss in research and publication. So a heads up for you, okay, a heads up for you. Question on your final exam about research is, I'm not asking you directly what is the standard of research. So what is the client, patient, student, subordinate research participation? No. What I do is basically I give you a scenario, okay, I give you a research scenario, and then I ask you to identify whether the actions of person in that scenario is ethical or unethical. So what are the standards which related to the behavior of the person in the situation? Okay, so I'm giving you the tips. So that questions actually involve this chapter. Okay, chapter on research. So basically, I describe it. I describe a situation, I give you a situation, and then I ask you to identify what are the research standards which is involved in that. And then I ask you to suggest a proper procedure for the person to conduct his or her research. There's a question here from Lokman, answer in essay form. Yes, it's an essay, and then it's an open book test. Open book test, so you can refer back to the notes and you can refer back to the textbook. You can even refer back to the online. Okay, you can search online. However, please do not copy. See why? All of your script, all of your answer will be sent to turn it in, and then you cannot have more than 20% similarity. If, say, for example, there are more than 20% similarity, then your answer script will not be accepted. So you can refer. You can refer to the textbook, you can refer to the notes, and you can even refer to online. But I don't think there is answer in online because the question I created myself, the situation itself I created myself. So it does require a lot of understanding. So I'm going to explain more in the next class, and if possible, I may need to conduct a session during your revision week to give you more preparation for the final exam. I'm giving you heads up because there are a lot of standards involved in research and publication. Okay, so is there any other questions? If there is no questions, so thank you very much. Uh, I will share the slides in the our group, okay? But I'm not sure whether to give half of the slide or going to give full of the slides. And I also will give you the recording of today's class, the recording of today's class, in case you may want to rewatch the class. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much, and see you guys next week.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sama.
Thank you, Doctor.
Gitu.
Data.